Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
Everyone is doing well, survived Snowmageddon. No major damage from falling ice sheets or metal roofs like we had. I hope everybody else avoided that. Thank you for being here this afternoon. This is the third of the town halls I posted. This one is going to be a little bit different than the ones in the past. I hope you will bear with me in a couple of respects. One of which is we've had to completely rearrange our schedule. So we were supposed to do our strategic planning meeting, council strategic planning meetings last week during the storm. They got moved to today and tomorrow. So we just got out of 6 hours plus of council strategic planning committee meetings, council meetings, and I have not had nearly the time I would like to completely organize my thoughts. So this is going to be a little bit more free-form and free-flowing than usual. This is going to be a little different town hall meeting in another respect, in that while I will entertain questions, and as many questions as you want, that's not going to be coming for a while, because I'm going to be downloading for a little bit. What I'm going to be talking about is kind of a quick overview of a lot of different issue areas that the town administration and the council are looking at, a review of 2024, preview of 2025. Then I want to eventually get to and spend more time on some long-term kind of strategic issues and, for lack of a better term, the vision thing. But before we get there, I want to start with this. I hope every one of you have seen this. If you haven't, I'm glad you're able to see it now. I've seen it multiple times. I never get tired of it. I apologize for everybody who has seen it, who has to sit through it again, but I think it speaks volumes.
To fully grasp the importance of Kiawah's incredible ecosystem, you have to see it for yourself. Whether that's exploring the twisting marsh creeks on an eco tour, taking a walk down the beach to see the dolphin strand feeding, or volunteering with the Turtle Patrol, visitors and locals alike can experience these natural wonders every day. I'm Jim Jordan, wildlife biologist for the town of Kiawah Island for over 20 years. My guiding light is to maintain the thriving ecosystem on this 5,000-acre barrier island as close to how it was a century ago. Every species on the island is integral to our natural community, whether they are seasonal visitors or year-round residents. Dolphins grace our shores every day, but what sets these dolphins apart is their distinctive hunting technique, known as strand feeding. The dolphins work as a team to corral fish towards the shore. They create a wave thrusting themselves and their prey out of the water, where they can easily enjoy their catch. Once they finish, they use their tails to wiggle back into the creek. This unique hunting method happens only in a few places around the world and can be observed from the shorelines of Captain Sam Spit, just a short walk down the beach from Beachwalker Park. Kiawah is home to more than 300 species of birds. Migratory birds like salt marsh sparrows and painted buntings find sanctuary here. And during the red knot spring migration, our beaches host thousands of these federally threatened shorebirds, a significant portion of the East Coast population. Kiawah was once celebrated for its thriving bobcat population, but their numbers have dramatically declined due to the use of certain rat poisons. Although these elusive creatures are rarely seen, their presence is vital to maintain the island's natural ecosystem. continued efforts are crucial to ensure the survival and recovery of Kiawah's iconic bobcats. Every summer, hundreds of loggerhead sea turtles make their way to the Carolina coast to lay their eggs. Kiawah is a popular destination due to the quiet, dark, and expansive beachfront. While most sea turtles nest at night, if you're lucky, you might catch one completing its nest just as the sun rises. Under the stars, a few months after the nest is laid, the hatchlings are born and make their way to the ocean, starting the next generation. A few days later, the Turtle Patrol takes inventory of each nest, often finding a few stragglers that need a little extra help to reach the sea. Now the young turtles must survive the challenges of the ocean. If they do, the females might one day return to this very beach to lay their own eggs, continuing the cycle. Everyone can get involved by supporting conservation efforts and respecting nature. This includes not feeding animals like alligators and maintaining a safe distance from all wildlife. Kiawah's turtles, dolphins, birds, and so many other critters have called this island home long before we did, and we hope they continue to do so. Together we can ensure Kiawah Island continues to inspire and captivate visitors for years to come.
Staff, I think, did an extraordinary job of working with Explore Charleston and putting together the production. And the principal reason for the existence of municipalities and our principal responsibility as elected officials is to provide for the health, safety, and welfare of our citizens. I think our responsibility on this particular place goes beyond that. That we need to be good stewards of this extraordinarily special place. My wife Laura is in the back benching. We moved here, I suspect, like a lot of other people, because beautiful place, great beach, golf courses, proximity to Charleston, all true. I had no appreciation until we had been here for a long period of time that all of those things are wonderful, but they are not what makes Kiawah Island truly unique. It is our extraordinary flora and fauna in which we coexist that we are stewards of, and a lot of what I am focused on, and indeed our fellow council members here, and I think most of them are here, is protecting our natural environment, protecting our native wildlife, and preserving the quality of all the things that we hold dear. Now, with that as a beginning, I kind of get to that at the end, move on to a little bit more mundane stuff now. So I want to touch upon a number of different topic areas to give you an update of what the town administration has been working on, what we're going to be working on, some of the things we discussed today, some of the things we're going to discuss tomorrow, and then I'll get to some of the vision things. I'll start with probably the most mundane stuff, which is dealing with the town administration. I don't want to belabor it because it's not the sexy stuff. But when I ran for mayor, one of the things I emphasized was that we were going to be transparent in everything that we do. And I hope that's come across. That's certainly been our intention. This is not intended as indirect slight, but we're not making any decisions behind closed doors. And I think you will see every day, if you've been to our meeting today, our strategic planning meeting, we did have some members of the public, or any of our council meetings, you come to those in person and see them, or you watch them online, you'll see that we have very robust discussions. We kind of leave it all out there. My fellow council members, I'm blessed, you all are blessed, that they are extraordinarily engaged We have very extensive discussions about a wide range of issues, and you see that, the sense of the sausage-making process in front of you. We also want to be more customer-centric. Ultimately, that we're here to serve the community. So I want to make sure that we're always responsive to the community, and as responsive as we can, and as completely and accurately as we can be. We try to enhance our communications and upgrade our communications to the community. We try to have more regular communication, more focused communication. One thing we're trying to avoid is sending out communications that try to kind of rationalize or justify anything we're doing. We'll simply explain what it is we're doing and why. Last summer, we issued the town's first community engagement survey to try to benchmark what we're doing well, what we need to improve upon. We're going to do that again this summer, and we'll try to identify the issue areas where the town can most improve. Now, we can't solve for everything. The last community engagement survey, we said, is the thing the town needs to most address is the front gate. Well, I see a couple of Kika board members here. The town's responsibility is not the first gate. I get that, but we will try to control what we control. There's a lot of kind of behind the scenes blocking and tackling as we grow as a community and we try to evolve as an organization to continue to professionalize. So over the course of the last year, we implemented, I host along with the town administrator, a weekly senior staff meeting every Monday morning, usually 90 minutes or 2 hours. We pay attention to what's on Kiawah, and occasionally questions are being asked, well, is the town paying attention to this? I can assure you that we are paying attention, we talk about it. It may not necessarily result in immediate action or communication, but we do talk about it. We try to stay on top of every issue that arises in the community. We've been taking an extensive review of all our existing policies and procedures. One thing we've done, for example, again, this is mundane, basic blocking and tackling, is develop a standardized municipal form of contract. Our contracts used to be all over the place. In a lot of cases, we were signing contracts that said we had to indemnify a third party. We had contracts that said if there was a dispute, we need to conform to law in Minnesota, etc. So we now have a standard form municipal contract. Same thing with standard form of request for proposal. We've implemented new or updated, revised, and tightened our accounting policies and procedures. We're in the process of completely revising, because there's a lot of stuff that was missing, our HR policies manual. Led by Councilmember Farrell, who's here, who chairs kind of our finance and administration, our audit committee, will be conducting for the first time not just an audit of our financial statements, but a separate audit of our internal control, to make sure that we have all the policies and procedures in place necessary to even remotely lead to the type of situation that existed a number of years ago where there was some financial malfeasance on the part of the town. I think we have really good policies and procedures. We've updated those, but we want to make sure that we are state-of-the-art and best practice in everything that we do. But that process of dealing with administration matters is ongoing. I've been perhaps overly focused on a lot of that basic blocking and tackling over the last few months, much to the chagrin of some of my staff who will complain to a fairly well with a fair degree of legitimacy, my micromanaging all of that. But attention has to be paid, and there's one thing that, for example, that I didn't mention is we're going to have written policies about a whole host of things. Whenever I ask a lot of questions is, well, why do we do it this way? Well, because we did it this way once upon a time. I said, well, where's that written down? And it's generally not. A lot of it's just verbal. And we can't, for the protection of the town, for the benefit of the community, to better understand what the rules of the road are, we're going to have more written policies and procedures. The next topic area I want to touch on here, public safety. public safety is really job one, and maybe job two, job three. There's been a lot of misconception about public safety related issues here on Kiawah Island. The town's been undertaking an assessment. We're not as far along as we would like in that regard of all the public resources, public safety related resources that are accessible to or on or accessible to the residents of Kiawah Island and our visitors to our island. I think it's fair to say two things based upon kind of the data we've gained thus far. One is we're very blessed that there's very, very, very little criminal activity on Kiawah Island that necessitates armed law enforcement response. That's been true over a long period of time. We hope that continues to be true. Most of their public safety related needs tend to be medical related, so I want to touch upon both of those very briefly. With regard to law enforcement, we have our code enforcement staff, our public safety officers on the town staff, and that includes also beach patrol. Kika Security has a number of security personnel as well, a number of whom transit the island on a regular basis. The resort has its own security personnel. All of those individuals are able to either enforce the town's municipal code and issue citations for that, or in Kika's case, issue violations for issue tickets for violations, citations for violations of Kika rules and regulations, but none of those individuals have custodial arrest authority. That resides with the Charleston County Sheriff's Office. So there have been some concerns about, do we have too little, too much? We're trying to better understand that. What I can tell you is that that is in flux right now for a couple of reasons. One, because we've had a sheriff's election recently, so we don't really yet know exactly what the new sheriff's staffing plans are going to be, and I'm going to be meeting with the new sheriff here in the next week or two to talk about that. We've also had contractual relationships with the sheriff's office for additional coverage, and that needs to be reevaluated as well. But I want to disabuse you if you've had a perception, because I've seen this stated in the past, that we don't have law enforcement coverage on Kiawah Island. That is categorically incorrect. Prior to the sheriff's election, the prior sheriff had actually established kind of a shadow district for the lower half of Johns Island, which included Kiawah Island and Seabrook. So there were two full-time deputies and a supervisor essentially assigned to provide law enforcement coverage of the lower half of Johns Island from Edenvale south. In addition to that, the town has had an off-duty deputy contract with the Charleston County Sheriff's Office that provides for up to 2 deputies can sign up for each of 3 8-hour shifts, 24/7 coverage. We have had an average of about 800 hours of coverage each month under that service agreement. So we've had almost 24/7. There are some days in which the midnight to 8 a.m. shift is not necessarily covered by an off-duty deputy, but for the most part, we always had deputies either on the island, at Freshfields, or in the close proximity. Is that too little, too much? Quite a bit relative to the amount of activity that warrants a law enforcement response, but that's something we're continuing to evaluate. Today we had an yes.
What do they do? Do they patrol neighborhoods? Do they come down our street?
So I'll answer in this case, but I would ask please kind of withhold questions as we go along, because there's a lot that I do want to cover. So please come back to that. Interesting little question. We don't exactly know because we don't have any direct control over them. We because they're not under the direction or supervision of town officials. They're under the direction of supervision of the Charleston County Sheriff's Office and their supervisor. But yes, we do know based on conversations and where they call in and report that they are sometimes just sitting along KIP, sometimes they're sitting at Freshfields, sometimes they are actually transiting across the island. One thing you should be aware of is that I didn't sufficiently appreciate is if there is an incident that requires a significant law enforcement presence, in addition to off-duty deputies and the full-time patrol in lower half of Johns Island, there's a lot of capability that can show up. I don't know if you all recall, about 6 months or so ago, there was a stolen car chase, a vehicle that ended up on Beachwalker Drive, just outside Inlet Cove. Surprised me, I live not far away, walked out to see what was going on. There were I think about a dozen law enforcement vehicles around them. So wait, how can that be? We have most 1 or 2 off-duty deputies and only a couple patrol folks. Well, as it turns out, there are deputies or detectives that are investigating crime on Johns Island. They respond to a call, they come down here. Sometimes you see vehicles out on Betsy Carson Parkway. That's traffic enforcement. That's different than the patrol deputies. So there's a lot of resources that can be brought to bear. But we're trying to get better data. We just don't quite have it yet. The primary issue has really been one of medical services available on the island. And we are, again, fortunate that we are, in some respects, careful how I want to say this, but just put it this way, extraordinarily well-serviced relative to the level of incidents that occur on Kiawah Island, medical incidents. We have Johns Island, St. John's Fire District, 2 stations. Those are staffed with, all their staff have some level of EMT-related training. The town's actually provided additional financial support to enhance their level of training. We also have Beach Patrol, which are, they're on the beach, but they can respond to events on island if necessary. They have, all their staff have some level of training to render medical assistance, and some are paramedic trained. In addition, we have currently, and this is an issue that we've got to continue to evaluate, a Charleston County EMS vehicle stationed at Station 6, which is the one right before, after Osprey, before the Beach Club, right at the end of Flyway, and that's actually staffed about 2/3 of the time. In addition, we have a 24/7 EMS facility here a couple hundred yards up the road. We have all of this. Seabrook doesn't have it, but we do. So we have a lot of resource capability, but we're still trying to evaluate, is that enough? Too much? Do we want more? Do we want to pay for additional services? So that's part of an ongoing assessment. But I do want to assure the community that from both a fire, law enforcement, code enforcement, rules and regulation enforcement, medical response, we have a lot of resources available on Kiawah Island, but we're in the process of evaluating whether, in fact, we might want to augment that. So that's kind of the biggest public safety issue I wanted to talk about. Councilmember Berner's here. One of the things that, again, I said blessed by our council members because they'll really roll up the sleeves. We actually had a moribund CERT team, the Community Emergency Response Team, that has how many members now?
22.
22. Had literally just kind of withered away on the vine because there had not been any appropriate oversight and management of that. Councilmember Berner has taken the bull by the horns, completely resuscitated the CERT effort function. In fact, I think we've got training coming up
in March.
Additional training, and we're looking for more more frequent ways in which to utilize the CERT team to deal with things that occur on the island. For example, if we'd been a little bit further along the process, they could have helped with the Snowmageddon process, at least identifying if there were downlimbs, crossing roads, or if there were roadways that were impassable, or if anybody needed any kind of particular assistance. That's something we're going to be continuing to look at going forward. The code enforcement is part of our responsibility. We're kind of renaming our code enforcement community service officers. Their responsibility will include in making sure at the end of the day that municipal codes are complied with. The idea is have a conversation. If we can get voluntary compliance, that's the best way forward. If we need to issue a citation, then we need to issue a citation. We want to have a consistent set of policies and procedures about that. We're going to have a new community service officer coming on board. One of the things I've directed them to do is be more visible on the island. So between the public safety team, as well as including the wildlife management team, you should be seeing more transit up and down the island of town vehicles to both monitor potential wildlife issues, monitor work sites for compliance with the dumpster covering requirements or littering requirements. They're also involved in short-term rental compliance issues, and all of that is ultimately going to be able to be most effective in that regard is going to require the community to communicate with us about issues that are identified, and we will try to respond to them on a timely basis. Infrastructure and public works is the next topic that I want to touch upon. The town actually has very little in the way of capital assets. This building, a bunch of vehicles, the equipment in this building, the bridge, 3 miles of road, that's it. We're very unique in the as municipalities in that regard, in that we don't have a lot of public infrastructure. Most of the infrastructure is owned and maintained by the community association. We've got 3 miles of road. The community association has, what, 40 or 50 miles of road. The ponds are maintained by the community association. In contrast to Seabrook, the town of Seabrook owns the Seabrook Island Public Utility, which provides wastewater treatment to the Seabrook Island and actually also the town of Kiawah Island. Most people don't realize. But that's owned by the town. Ours is privately owned. So the town's direct ability to impact infrastructure and public works is a more regulatory one. That is something we're taking a look at. We're reevaluating all our kind of relationships with all our different infrastructure and service providers. I hope he doesn't mind me calling them out, but KICA board member Paul Hennessy has suggested that the town, but I think it's not just the town and KICA sitting down together, should better understand what is the preparedness of all our infrastructure service providers, whether it's water, wastewater, electricity, telecommunications, etc., to be prepared to respond to whether it's a storm event, tornadoes, hurricanes, fires, etc. What is the age of the infrastructure? Are they making appropriate capital investments in the infrastructure? These are all things as a community we don't have a good handle on right now, and we really need to. So we're going to be exploring those issues. Those issues are going to be on the council side under the direction of Council Member Lance Spencer. And one of the issues that you may have heard about is we're also taking a look at our telecommunications infrastructure, kind of a fresh look at that. We'd had a council meeting that was extraordinarily informative where we got the owners of the cell towers on the island, and there are actually 7 of them, to come in and provide us data charts were pretty fascinating in terms of coverage areas and where coverage is not great on the island, because I think we all know that there are some dead spots around the island, regardless of who the service provider you have is. And what we're doing is trying to figure out what is the best way to enhance coverage, because it's not only just a kind of quality of life issue, it's critical in emergency situations. And we do know is if we have really on July 4th weekends, it's really crowded, connectivity is a very significant issue, and that's when you have to have, for emergency preparedness reasons, your greatest connectivity. So whether it's code changes because of our cell tower ordinances, whether we need to encourage additional capital investment, whether it's something the town can more proactively do, is something, a process we're undertaking here in 2025. Other little minor infrastructure-related issues over the course of the last year, and this fits into public works, we have a new contract with a new trash waste management service provider. My experience, personal experience as a resident, is that this service provider is markedly better than the prior service provider. What we know from a data standpoint is we get many fewer service complaints than used to be the case. But a lot of people complained it was a more expensive contract and fees went up. Well, the fact of the matter is you kind of get what you pay for, but there had been no increase in service over a number of years. And the town does subsidize, just so you know, the town does subsidize to the tune of about $1 million a year waste management services. A lot of communities simply, that's a complete pass-through. The town does subsidize waste management services. Last year we completed the little infrastructure project outside the main gate. I hope everybody agrees that that's helped with flow, certainly off the island. Also, ingressing and egressing Beachwalker Drive has improved. There's still issues coming onto the island. The town has tried to do what it can. It's a little bit of a Band-Aid by having a community service officer dealing with traffic issues in the morning and at peak times, and we'll continue to do that. And we may need to improve in what we do in that regard, but ultimately, issues coming onto the island are largely a function of the location of the gate. There's a limited amount that the town can do in that regard. We've undertaken landscaping enhancements along Beachwalker Drive, nothing that had never been addressed before. We had done KIP. We are now going to be undertaking here this year, probably the first quarter or so, some leisure trail improvements along the upper portion of Beachwalker Drive. For whatever reason, when the 2/3 of a mile from Riverview, from Bobcat Lane all the way down to Beachwalker County Park was done, the 200 yards along the KIRE building, Beachwalker Drive was not done, and it's a hazard right now. There are some areas on KIP, Leisure Trail, that constantly flood, and we're going to deal with that issue here in this next quarter. Eventually, I'm not sure we'll get to it this year, probably not, but we need to repave Beachwalker Drive. KICA has a policy, whether it's the right policy or not, but KICA has a policy whenever a road reaches a fair level, they schedule it for repavement. Beachwalker Drive is kind of below the quality of any other road on Kiawah Island. Now, we may hold off on that because there's going to be more construction traffic along Beachwalker Drive coming up, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But that's another infrastructure-related project. We also installed EV stations this last year, and those actually have been surprising how much those have been taken up. So that's kind of a highlight of infrastructure and public works, and this isn't going to be exhaustive. Natural environment and native wildlife, apropos of the video you saw. I recently had a meeting a couple of weeks ago. Was at an annual meeting of, it's called South Carolina Beach Advocates, but it's mostly all the coastal communities, and I was able to meet with all of my fellow mayors of other communities. And we compared notes on a lot of things. Coyotes was one of the things we were comparing notes on. But one of the things that they were very envious of is that we have on staff a wildlife biologist. We have 3 members of our team that focus each and every day on protecting our natural environment and our native wildlife. But it's not just protecting, the extraordinary amount of research that's undertaken. Right now, they're taking samples of rodents to understand what's happening with SGAs and are they going to migrate into bobcats. They do bird banding. They actively support all our volunteer programs, whether it's shorebird, the shorebird stewards, turtle patrol, marine mammal network, etc. When they had coyote management issues, they had no place to start. They didn't even have any protocols in place, other islands, that is. And they didn't have wildlife biologists. And by the way, Kika also has one as well. They had to just bring in hired guns to respond to the situation as best they could, limited effect at very, very high cost, without any understanding of what the size or nature of the problem is, where the animals were, etc. I think we're extraordinarily blessed to have folks like Jim Jordan, Aaron Given, and Michael Gamble on our staff to be able to look at these issues each and every day to our collective benefit. On SGAs, we've spent a lot of time resuscitating the Bobcat Guardian program, and that's ultimately only going to work to the extent that the entire community makes it work. But we've also been working with the State Department. Clemson University is actually responsible for rodenticide regulation. Just got an email today from Dr. Stephen Cole, who heads that department. We've made some progress now in getting additional state regulation, principally driven because of what's been happening with regard to SGAs here on Kiawah Island. It doesn't go as far as we'd like, but it's certainly a step in the right direction, and we appreciate the fact that the regulatory agency department has moved forward to address the SGA issue, notwithstanding there's a lot of pressure on the other side from the rodenticide, from the industry, to not do anything to restrict their activities in any way. So we're making progress in that regard. We're continuing to look at a whole range of issues regarding stormwater management, taking care of our marsh. We're going to get to that. We're revisiting our beach management ordinance to make sure that we're doing all we can to ensure the health and vitality of our dunes, both because they're a protective barrier against storms, but also because they are a critical habitat for a lot of our flora and fauna. Development-related issues, which is a lot of people's favorite topic, or it has been. It was a little over a year ago, about 14 months ago now, that the development agreement with Kiawah Partners ended. A lot of things have transpired since then, obviously gotten a lot of attention in the community. One of the things, as you know, is that the town joined forces with the Community Association and the Kiawah Conservancy and filed a lawsuit against the developer, the owner of Captain Sam Spit, in order to enforce obligations that we believe were pretty clear under the terms of the development agreement. The point of that was to ensure, at the end of the day, that there is no development on Captain Sam Spit, full stop. That litigation has essentially been on hold for a while, and there may be an opportunity to start discussing what an ultimate resolution of that might be. But as you may know, the developer filed a takings claim against the state many, many years ago, 15 years or so ago, given the Supreme Court case that the Coastal Carolina League was involved in that prohibited the building of essentially a road. They couldn't build a revetment to access Captain Sam Spit, and the developer sued the state for claiming, $200 million in damages, and they're seeking $40 million now. We now believe that the 3 entities that filed the suit have a claim to, most, if not all, of some type of legal claim to Captain Sam Spit. Our commitment, what I've stated is, again, our commitment is to maintaining Sam Spit as a natural environment in its current pristine condition. Now, ultimately, is there, if the state gets involved, part of the concern is, what does that mean? And I've had conversations recently with the head of the Department of Parks and Recreation. If it's a state park, then do they want to have access? Do they want to have facilities on Captain Sam Spit? My view is, I don't want to see that. I don't think most in the community want to see that either. If it's under state control or ownership and it's Department of Natural Resources, so it's maintained in its natural state like parts of Wades Island, some other areas along the coast, that might be a different equation. But right now, we've got to work through these issues collectively, and it's now going to be the town and the Conservancy and KICA are going to have a seat at the table in terms of resolving any of those issues. Stay tuned on that one. One of the things that I talked about when I ran was we were going to be more rigorous in our assessment of, and as necessary, attention to application of zoning standards with regard to development projects. And that resulted in a number of letters coming from the planning department with regarding to the proposed site plans, the finishing out of the Cape and Ocean Pines and West End, that ultimately led to the developer suing the town and suing 3 homeowners association in that area. Long story short, this has been covered. I suggested, I think in the first meeting when I became mayor and was sitting at the dais, explain to the community and the developer that there was a path forward, a legally sustainable and viable path forward to resolution of these disputes, that the town council, nor the mayor, nor any or the planning director actually had any authority to simply waive away the application of the zoning standards. It's in the code, and if you want to have a departure from the code, then there needs to be a court resolution of that process. Finally, it took a long time. I'm not sure why it took as long as it did, but ultimately, the parties sat down to a mediation process, and I want to commend Council Members Farrell and Council Members Berner for leading that effort. They invested an extraordinary amount of time and resources to ensuring that the interests of the community were protected. Now, the nature of any settlement agreement and the nature of any mediation, it's a little bit of give and take. What I can tell you is, as of yesterday, the consent order was finally agreed. We announced, what was it, back in October, that we had entered into the mediation agreement. Words on the paper. There had to be some drawings, essentially, for oversimplifying, that it matched the words on the paper. That process took several months more. And ultimately, this has to be approved by a court. And as of a couple of days ago, the parties agreed, again, led by our lawyers, as well as the 2 council members, that resulted in a consent order being filed by the court that we assume the court will accept. And so the site plans that are associated with that are now matters of public record. So that just happened. I don't want to kind of characterize the mediation settlement agreement other than to note that relative to what was originally proposed by the developer, what we've ended up with is 2 fewer buildings on Ocean Pines, 1 fewer building on Upper Beachwalker West End, half floor eliminated from 8 buildings on West End, 27 fewer dwelling units overall, substantially more parking for the Cape Club when it does open up, and critically important, no extension of Cape Point Road past where it goes right now, so that avoids the removal of a whole bunch of trees, the last set of trees that were separating the Cape from Beachwalker County Park and views to Seabrook and Cacique and what have you. So that's kind of the substance of the proposal right now. And we are where we are. So site plans, just to be clear, pursuant to this agreement, site plans will be issued, building permits will be issued, they will be allowed to develop pursuant to that agreement. Now, that's going to happen in Ocean Pines. Upper Beach Walker, they've indicated they very much would like to have what is known as a planned development. What they've obtained as a result of the mediation settlement is the ability to develop by right for 2 parcels in Upper Beach Walker, right next to the Kika administration site, as well as immediately adjacent to that. There are 3 other parcels next to the general store that are not part of this mediation settlement agreement. They would like to develop the entire 5 parcels together in a unified way. The only way they can do that is bring forward a request for a planned development. When that happens, you can kind of tear up all their by right stuff, and you're going to have a fresh set of negotiations about what a planned development looks like. What I've said, and most of my fellow council members, I believe, have publicly stated this, is that if there is a planned development that meets the needs, economic needs and interest of the developer, while also being acceptable to all the surrounding neighbors, hallelujah. If that's not the case, then they can simply develop the 2 parcels by right, and that's it. Now, what the community has said to them is, kind of conditions of community support are things like lower density, lower building heights, greater buffers, protection of grand trees, and no short-term rentals in those properties. That's kind of what the community said is on the table. Again, we haven't received a PDD. Who knows whether we will, but I believe Mr. Permar is here. Maybe he has update on whether that is ever forthcoming, but those are points that have been previously conveyed to you and others that in meetings that have been held before. So that's where we are with that right now. The other development thing that will be happening this year on island that you need to be mindful of is the resort has its own development agreement with the town. The resort has indicated that it is interested in entering into a new development agreement with the town. And those preliminary conversations have already started about what that might look like. At the end of the day, one of the points that the resort always makes is, well, they're good stewards. They're here for the long term. We're not the other guy. I think a lot of people would generally agree that the Goodwin family and the resort have been good stewards of the island, that they've done things in a high quality way. But one of the things about a development agreement is it confers benefits on the developer because it enables them to lock in zoning standards and not have to deal with any changes in zoning codes, notwithstanding conditions changing for some number of years. The whole point of the development agreement under the state statute is that's a give and take. That's a quid pro quo. In exchange for benefits for the developer, there should be some benefits for the community as well. And so we've got to try to figure out collectively what the benefit is to the community of entering into a development agreement that would benefit the developer. I look forward to having that conversation because my view is ultimately there can be an agreement that would be mutually beneficial. But we're not there yet. That's going to be a very public process. There's not going to be anything that happens until there's been a full public airing of the issues, ultimately first through the Planning Commission and then from the town council itself. There are a couple of off-island development issues you need to be mindful of. Obviously, a lot of attention has been paid to the Island Park Place development just up the road. That is in stasis right now. We held a town hall meeting. I hosted one along with Secret Mayor Bruce Kleinman. A packed room, a lot of interest in the issue. We had Council Member Jenny Honeycutt as well as Council Member Joe Boyd from Charleston County Council indicated they thought they had the votes to hold it off. Still at the precipice, the cusp. The reason there hasn't been action is I think the developer doesn't believe it has the votes right now. They keep asking for deferrals. They keep pursuing various strategies to try to line up votes to get that project approved. The town has chimed in on this. I've testified personally on a couple of occasions before the council. The Kiawah Conservancy has been particularly proactive in this effort. And one thing we have to understand is, apart from the traffic congestion related issues, one of the real concerns is that entire project, which would be 2/3 the size of Freshfields Village, would be on septic. On septic about a mile away from, again, Kiawah River watershed. So stay tuned, pay attention to that, and all of that's going to kind of feed into something I want to talk about a little bit later. So one of the things we also are looking at in the town coming forward is whether we have enough tools as a town to really appropriately deal with a wide range of development issues along the marsh and river, along the beachfront, the Sam Spit, along our roadways and right-of-way. So we're going to be taking a look at this year, along with the Planning Commission, is whether we need to have some more regulatory tools available to allow us to protect the community's interest with regard to the town's jurisdiction, and then we want to continue to be more proactively engaged with Charleston County in issues that are outside the town's boundaries. Enough on development right now. So now I want to shift gears, and this is where Neil or Petra, we skip past the, there is one slide on development on and off island. Maybe I'll quickly reference that. This one we just talked about. I mean, the issue is the resort agreement between resorts. Everybody, I think, understands ultimately deal with what happens at the site of the old Kiawah Inn across from the Cooper Point Playground, and then what would happen at the site of the East Beach Conference Center. Now, as Roger Warren has publicly stated, they have some ideas and plans with regard to West Beach, not necessarily East Beach right now, but all of that would have to be fleshed out in the development agreement. But we do need to pay attention to things that are happening off island as well. Kiawah River development continues to expand. It's entitled, I think, for about 1,200 units. They don't have nearly that many built, so it will continue to build out. Kiawah Partners wants to build the Orange Hill development. That's further up Bohicket. But what the interaction will be between Orange Hill and Kiawah Island and transiting back and forth is an issue that we're going to have to pay attention to. As you know, the Seafields facility is well underway, and I think it's intended to be now under ownership of Bishop Gatson, intended to be open later this year, and then the MUSC facility will start being built out soon as well. Let's move to the next item. What I want to talk about now, this may seem really down into the weeds on some of this stuff, but this is going to inform some of the things I'm going to talk about. It took me a couple of years, and I'm still coming to grasp with the very unique aspect of the town's revenue sources and expenditures and our budget. And what it means is this town is blessed in a lot of respects, and my fellow mayors in other towns were very envious. A couple things. One, they have to spend millions of dollars every year on beach renourishment because they have eroding beaches. We're blessed to have an accreting beach. We're set aside about $700,000 for a beach renourishment project up at the east end around the ocean course that we've had to do every few years. But that's kind of it. The largest amount we've ever had to spend on a beach renourishment project many, many years ago was about $3.6 million. We have an extraordinary balance sheet. Well, I'll get to them in a minute. But people have to understand is we have a unique set of revenue sources that most communities don't. And that is all this of the town's total revenues, which are about $15.5 million budgeted in 24-25. They're actually going to come in ahead of that. Almost $7 million are accommodations-related taxes. The state accommodations tax, county accommodations tax, hospitality tax, local options tax. Those monies have to be spent in a certain way and within a certain period of time. We've got two completely different budgets. A regular operating budget and this completely separate, what I would characterize as a pass-through budget. Money comes in from these revenue sources. It has to go back out to tourism-related expenditures. And that's going to be critically important as we talk about this. The biggest one, you see state tax monies, it's actually going to be about $3.1 million, has to be spent in certain limited, restricted ways, and has to be spent within 2 years. And that's going to be kind of critically important where I start talking about some of these other issues. Our other revenue sources are, the typical stuff that support the typical operations of the town government. So go to the next slide. We'll pick that up.
Right. Sorry about that.
So this is the restricted funds expenditure. So again, this has to go to certain limited things, and this is how it's divided up right now. Simply budgeted. See that big 55%? That wasn't really budgeted. That's about $2 million. That was $3 million that comes in. 900,000 or so has to go by statute to the Charleston Visitors Bureau. That's statutorily required. The rest is people apply for state aid tax funds. We have a state aid tax committee, and they make applications to the town for those, how to spend those funds. Now, the resort has gotten, I don't know if the road is here, but I think about 900,000, maybe $900,000. I'm sorry for my math on that, to support, the marathon and a bunch of big events. The Andale Inn gets some, Freshfields Village gets some, and others. But they don't have to go to all the sources, which I'm going to get to. Go ahead to the next slide. This is just our general, what I characterize as our regular operating budget, which is, 60% of our overall revenue. So, but even some of these things are a little bit odd because you see like solid waste. It's both an expenditure, but was also a revenue. And again, it's not a straight pass-through. We subsidize to the tune of $1,000. But the one thing that's kind of important is to understand that in the day, salaries and benefits, that's kind of our fixed cost, is about $3.5 million a year. But that is relative to the $15.5 million that we claim as an overall operating budget is really two separate budgets. We go to the next slide. Here's where this begins to hit home. We're sitting on $43 million in cash here in the town of Kiawah. $43 million in cash. We don't have an ounce of debt. The town once borrowed to finance this building and paid that back pretty quickly. This $43 million is growing each and every year. In fact, this year we'll probably add another $2 to $3 million in surplus to our general, our total reserves. We continue to earn interest on this. So the question is, what's that money there for? What are we going to spend it on? Now, historically, the idea was, and I've talked to former council members, well, wanted reserve funds for kind of the rainy day. In this case, the rainy day is, the Noah's Ark flood, Cat 5 hurricane, this, that, and the other thing. Absolutely, you should have some reserves for those kinds of events. But let's walk through the math on that. This building is one of our assets. Fire takes it out, tornado, flood, earthquake, it's insured. It's fully insured for replacement cost. So to replace this building, if we completely lost it, would not require much of a dent in the general fund. Our bridge, insured, wouldn't require taking down the reserves to finance that. Beach renourishment, yes. We did have a $3.6 million project one time, and in a really big storm, that could be $10, $15 million. But it's not $43 million, and this continues to grow each and every day. So the question is, what's it there for? What are we saving it for? How should that best be utilized? Now, I'm Midwesterner, so I'm pretty tight with my checkbook, and I don't care if I have the money. Any given expenditure, it's going to be a value proposition assessment. So I'm not suggesting we just spend money just because we have money. Believe me, we're scrutinizing every single budget item. I don't care if it's $100, $1,000, $100,000. If it's not money that's prudently spent with regard to that purpose, then we're not going to spend it. But we do have $43 million. So I just want to have that as a context for now what I want to talk about and kind of shift to what I characterized as the beginning as more of the vision thing. What are the issues that are most concerning to the community? I've always heard about traffic congestion.
Amenities.
Amenities. Amenities.
Way to go,
Every
Sharon.
PICA board meeting, it's amenities. Preserving and protecting what's kind of natural here. Overdevelopment, over-commercialization, up and down Betsy Carson Parkway or anywhere else. Is there something we can do about that? Heretofore, the conversation about amenities has been, well, Keek would like to add amenities for its members, but the issue is not much land, no property, or very little property on the island itself. Is there a role that the town can play in that regard? But I want to start first. I'm going to talk about 3 C's: conservation, community, and connectivity. I want to start with conservation. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. Boy, I forgot about this. And before we get I said, back up to last one.
That one.
Here are the things that all the accommodations tax, that's $6.7 million in revenues, has to be spent and only can be spent on certain things. This is the list of things. Number 3 and number 4, most importantly, underline number 3, because I'm going to talk about that. The construction, maintenance, and operation of facilities for civic and cultural activities, including construction and maintenance, as well as for nearby roads, and by the way, also includes financing. Where we've taken advantage of is really number 4, heretofore. For example, beach patrol. Our contract with beach patrols we discussed today for beach patrol services is close to $600,000, a little less than that. $6 70% of that, that is the one bullet that says this expenditure item has to be based on estimated percent of cost directly attributed to tourists. The town has estimated that we actually, certainly during peak periods of time, that there are more guests and visitors on the island. About 70% of the people on the island are guests and visitors, not residents. But so we've been able to pay for the cost of our off-duty services, Charleston County contract, through 70% through ATAX funds. We've been able to pay 70% of beach patrol through ATAX funds, and so on and so forth. There's other examples of that. We've never really looked at number 3 heretofore. You can also obviously spend it, the second to last bullet, on control of waterfront erosion, including beach renourishment. So now, so I've had a lot of conversations over the last year or two with our neighbors across Johns Island, Seabrook, town of Seabrook and across Johns Island. And what they've always conveyed to me, and I've certainly heard and seen this in part of our community, is all that Kiawah is interested in is itself. You know, that our interests stop at either the front gate or the bridge. My own view is that's extraordinarily myopic for a number of reasons. And I want to start to try to define our interest in a much broader way than just the island itself. And recognize we're off the island right now already. Freshfields Village, part of the town of Kiawah Island, not on the island. Municipal Center, not on the island. How do I begin to think about our, what I would call, zone of direct interest, and particularly tying back into the video we saw at the very beginning? This is the Kiawah River watershed. Everything that happens in this area ultimately runs off, effluent or otherwise, runs off into our watershed. What are the implications of that? Next slide, please. Oh, yes. This is a 2024 schematic of where shellfish harvesting is restricted or prohibited. That's our watershed, folks. The health of our marsh is critical to the long-term resiliency of Kiawah Island. And we're not going to have a healthy marsh if we don't have a healthy river system. We're recreating in here. We have locals as well as guests that are harvesting shellfish, crabbing, etc. What the state tells us is they shouldn't be doing that because it's not healthy. This has gotten worse. If you see a time series, and I actually didn't include the sides from 2018, 2020, 2022, this has gotten worse. Because there have been additional development on the lower half of Johns Island. I would argue that any development, anything that's happening on the lower half of Johns Island in our watershed should matter to us. Second, we love our bobcats. You see all the data points there. This is from 2014 to 2024. Yes, they're primarily on Kiawah Island, but our bobcats transit off of Kiawah Island. Their habitat includes lower Johns Island. So if we want to protect our water quality, if we want to protect our wildlife corridors, then we need to be concerned about what's happening on lower Johns Island. Next slide. This is areas within the watershed that are already preserved. And Donna, the green is all conservancy protected lands. I believe the purple is all Low Country Land Trust. I'm not sure. But the question is, conservancy, as you know, recently, and we participated, we helped finance the acquisition of properties with the old Rosebank farm stand and going back over to Bohicket River. We should want those numbers to grow. and grow significantly. So how do we get there? Next slide, please. No, we're not yet. No, back up. So, the town contributed $75,000 to the Conservancy's application to the County Greenbelt Initiative in order to enable it to acquire in fee simple those two pieces of property. They're now going to be sweetgrass demonstration, interpretive center, nature trails, etc. They've been looking at a number of different properties to potentially acquire or to put under conservation around Kiawah Island, around Johns Island. I will admit, when we first did that, I was a little bit kind of grudgingly going along with it. Why should our monies be spent on things off island? And by the way, can't the Conservancy raise its own funds? And gee, this is county, this is in the county, so the county should be principally responsible for that. My thinking has evolved pretty substantially around those issues. And I don't know what your thoughts are, and if you've had questions or concerns, I hope you will have an open mind about what the opportunity set is to be able to address some of these issues. The town had the opportunities, twice tried to acquire the little parcel right next to the town center. Those offers were not accepted. That's unfortunate. I wish they had been. Right behind us, 2 days ago, I heard a lot of chainsawing. I don't know how many acres, and Stephanie's not here, there are a number of acres back here. There's a parcel directly behind the town center. I was very chagrined to learn a couple of things. One, 2 parcels that were combined are being clear cut. 34 single-family homes are going to be built in there, built by right, all on septic, 100 feet from Haulover Creek. That's one disconcerting thing. The other thing is that the town had an opportunity to buy that property 4 or 5 years ago for about $800,000. It sold on January 3rd for $8 million. We have a $43 million balance sheet. Should we be thinking proactively and creatively about opportunities to either outright acquire, or if not acquire, participate with conservation organizations to put in place conservation easements that will restrict development in our watershed and our native wildlife corridor? My belief is yes. Where the property right across the street in which the developer was trying to build a marina outside the urban growth boundary. The town of Seabrook ultimately decided not to annex that property, and there were some other issues with regard to sewer connectivity. At the end of the day, if hypothetically that parcel became available, would that be worth taking a look at to acquire? Not to expand the town's boundaries, not to grow and provide different commercial opportunities, not to provide additional residential development opportunities, but to either conserve or turn into public park space. My view, again, is yes, we should look at that. One thing I want to propose is that we establish our own Greenbelt Fund, our own conservation fund, set aside $2 million, $5 million of our reserves to be available for conservation organizations, whether it's a conservancy or low country land trust, to apply for monies to support either fee simple acquisitions or conservation easements in our zone of direct interest. And we should also be open to looking at direct acquisitions. We've also had conversations previously, I think that's publicly reported, about potentially acquiring the KIRE building and whether that could be amenity space. We need to be open to those kinds of conversations. I came around once I learned, finally better understood the nature of our revenue sources, our expenditures, and the amount of reserves we have. One thing I should mention about reserves, $43 million, we have about $8 million in our kind of core operating budget. The Government Finance Officers Association says municipalities, they recommend, have 2 months of reserves.
3 years.
We have many more than even the 3 years. Because, again, you separate out the ATAX side of the budget. Seabrook has 6 months. We have multiple years. Again, to what end? So, conservation, that's the first C. Now, community connectivity. Connectivity, I don't want to belabor here because it's going to tie into this next one. There are some previous proposals that we've looked at and we're now revisiting about providing pedestrian and bike connectivity from Seabrook, Kiawah, Freshfields, onto Johns Island, to the municipal center, to the Conservancy's lands. I suspect all of you have seen that sometimes at night, when I'm exiting in here in dark, there are a lot of longtime residents of Johns Island who are not necessarily fortunate enough to own cars. They're patronizing Freshfields Village. They're on bikes or walking down the middle of Betsy Carson Parkway without any lights, without any reflectors or anything. That's just not acceptable for any of us. We need to do better as a broader community. But what I can also tell you is the resort is going to be, as you may be aware, building another golf course at Oak Point. They're also going to be building workforce housing there. Roger Warren would very much like to have his workforce be able to have access, pedestrian and bicycle access to us. But where it really becomes important is because of this next idea, community. Don't go here yet, but let me. Go ahead.
No.
So, Ms. Gallagher shouted out amenities. A couple things came to mind in this context. I'm mindful of the fact that we don't have a lot of community meeting and gathering space. Interestingly enough, I was intending to do this presentation tomorrow afternoon at this time. I could not do so because our world had reserved this space. It's been used by other community organizations, which I think is wonderful. It's a municipal facility, but it's also the purpose of this particular room is by and large to carry out municipal business. The question is, does the town have a role in contributing to helping to, oh wait, you put it up.
You told me to.
No, I said
Yeah, you did.
Didn't you say yes?
yes.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
But also what underpinned this was, you recall that the town undertook a feasibility study for a performing arts center. And what we looked at was a number of different things. A standalone, purpose-built, dedicated performing arts center. And the question is, where would the land, would you acquire land, where would it be sited, how would it be staffed, how would it be paid for? There are a whole host of issues that still remain. I still think there's an opportunity, at some point in time down the road, particularly if Ando West is developed, to pursue the concept of a dedicated performance arts center that is state-of-the-art. But can we solve for a couple of things now or in the near term? And I said, I started a conversation with staff and others. Mark Permar, I appreciate the time he invested early on about reimagining what the municipal center complex might be. We've got 21 acres here, no land on Kiawah Island. There's 21 acres here. It's pretty well underutilized. Meetings like this, occasional few committee meetings, but not much reason to get over here pretty antiseptic. And I invited another community member, Mark Kamens, who many of you may know, was part of our ARB task force, resident on the island, longtime architect, built probably 100 homes. And I said, Mark, what are your thoughts? I'd love to get your thoughts about kind of what the art of the possible is. And I was thinking about the area, the 3 or 4 acres over there, that's kind of completely unused. But that started introducing a whole set of complications. As soon as we sat down, he said, "You got it all wrong, Brad. The obvious solution is build a wing to this, add a wing to this building that becomes a community meeting space, community gathering space, a community auditorium." Reasons for that were a lot less expensive. You tie into existing infrastructure. You don't need any additional staffing support. You take advantage of everything right through the center here, or you can come in a different way. And he also has this extraordinary vision. It's hard to imagine it here. We are right on the marsh. There's an opportunity to really embrace our space. And he walked back out there. We walked all the way to the marsh, and he said, most of that is understory, underbrush, a couple of water oaks, laurel oaks. They can be taken down. They're not in great shape. You've got a handful of grand oaks back there. You open up that space, create an extraordinary visual back into the marsh, and that's what the back end, and we'll see that in a minute. But anyway, this is just high-level conceptual. He just invested his own time and energy in developing this concept of adding a wing to this building that would be a community civic space. It would be usable for meetings like this rather than here. It could be used by our world. It could be used by HOAs, large HOA regimes. Kika, if it had enough, could use that space. It would include an auditorium. It can also solve for, it's not going to be a dedicated performing arts space, but it would also solve for, this size is, it can be plus or minus, is about 300-seat auditorium. That would allow that facility to be used for about 2/3 of existing Arts Council performances. The Arts Council does an extraordinary job in putting together great programming for our benefit. They've been spending all day yesterday in doing that work, and the chair of the Arts Council, David Wool, is right here. But right now, I couldn't appreciate not just the work that goes into putting on the performance, the season, but all the work that is involved in staging every single facility where events are held right now. Whether it's the Turtle Point Clubhouse, whether Seabrook Clubhouse, with Church of Our Savior, Church of Holy Spirit, and even at the West Beach Conference Center. Build it up every time, take it down. Bring it in, take it out. It costs, every time there's a piano, we have a piano part of it, we have to rent $2,000 or so?
$2,450 next year.
Okay. So, again, all of that, we could actually dramatically reduce the operational cost of our current Arts Council program season. And actually put that into performances if we had a facility where a lot of that was already available. Next slide.
Where's the pool?
This is just a little bit bigger image. What you see is it's we're going to go to the next one, then we come back to this. This is just, again, one architect's rendering of what is in the art of the possible. So the lower elevation is what it would look like as you're driving in right now over the road into the complex right here. And then the top one is if you were back on the creek, that's what you would see it from that end. Back up one, please, Petra. You'll notice that there's both the auditorium, there's additional meeting rooms, especially up top. There's a big area can be kind of right now. You'll see the Kiawah Arts Guild puts a lot of paintings and stuff around here. It's kind of dark and dingy and it's hard to visualize. That could be a better space for that. The stage would have a wall that could open up and you would have full glass on the back and you could have receptions, and if community organization wanted to have a reception there or something like that, that would be available. Folks, that's it. I've gone on a long, long, long time. I appreciate your patience.
Can I congratulate you on one thing?
Yes, ma'am.
Parking spaces in front of the building. That's the front door. How
Well,
many years- how many years have they-
underutilized here. By the way, the fire department, there's a formula for the number of parking spaces you need relative to the number of seats. Marquis was just solve for that, but it includes utilizing the grass areas for overflow parking. And by the way, there's another little issue I need to mention with respect to all of this. Connectivity is part of it. It's another reason to have connectivity. But interesting little fact I mentioned is this facility, residents on the island have sewer provided by Kiawah Island Utility. Fresh Fields, MUSC, and Seafields have sewer provided by the Seabrook Island Utility. We're on septic. That's not acceptable. Again, our septic field is 100 feet, 50 feet from Hallover Creek, and we can't expand here, increase usage with our existing septic facilities, and I don't want septic there. So I've had conversations now, started conversations with Seabrook Island Utility Commission. They originally said, no, we're not interested in providing, just like they said in the first instance when this was built. We don't have to provide use coverage service, and we're not going to do so. Conversations started to come around and evolve now, and I've had conversations with the mayor as well, and council, because they recognize that Seabrook Island residents, who also go to our Arts Council programs, Seabrook Island Council has used this facility in the past, that this could be a benefit to them as well, and all of a sudden that starts opening up conversations by putting sewer over here. I just forgot to mention that one little kind of critical part. This all comes together. Again, I've spoken for way, way, way too long, as I am wont to do. So I'm happy to open it up to questions now. Councilmember Farrell.
I think you missed the punchline on this. Talk about the financing and why we were concerned in the past.
Okay.
Not concerned as much now.
I didn't yet tie together.
Thank you.
So that's, remember, go back to what I underlined in use of state tax funds. Every single dollar could be paid out of state accommodations taxes. Now, let's say this addition costs $12 million. This building cost $8 million to build. Maybe at $12 million, $15 million, I don't know. Now, we could actually write a check. We have the ability to write a check, but we don't actually have to spend a dime of that $43 million. We could use that for other purposes because we can borrow, we can finance. We have a clean balance sheet, just like this building was financed and it paid down pretty quickly. We could borrow and then pay it off pretty quickly annually with tax-related funds. And again, all the building of the parking lots, any other access roads or anything, the ongoing maintenance, all payable by tax funds. Now, there are other claimants on tax funds. So I'm not suggesting, and we're never going to get to a point where the $6.7 million in tax funds is simply devoted to this. But right now, we struggle to get enough applications to figure out how to utilize at least the $2.1 million of state aid tax funds. And there's a reason why our reserve restricted funds keep going up, because we keep rolling them over to the next year, and then we have to spend it again. So my apologies on, thank you, Councilmember Farrell. The idea is here, by the way, another important point, everybody says our tax dollars. Another respect in which Kiawah Island is unique is there are no tax dollars that you are directly paying to go to any of this, because we don't have our own property tax. All the property taxes that we pay just go to Charleston County, and they stay there. They support Charleston County Sheriff's Office, EMS, public schools and everything, but we're not paying taxes indirectly, hospitality taxes, food and beverage, but for the most part, who's paying this is the people who stay at short-term rentals and at the sanctuary at the Andale Inn. Thank you. Questions? Yes?
just have a comment that the concept you just laid out as far as expansion does make this campus really much more functional, usable, and accessible, and everything else. And it takes away any concerns that some people may have about a performance facility or auditorium being on beyond the peak, taking up space and traffic and everything else. So it resolves a lot of
Thank you, Bill.
those
Thank you,
issues.
Gail.
Thank you. Bye.
Yes, Sherry.
Could a gymnasium and an indoor pool?
If you can't put the gym in, you have to put the pool.
Things are possible in time, but let's focus on the here and now. And by the way, I'll let you to continue to have discussions with your neighbors in Retz Bluff and Sora Rail about land on Kiawah Island. Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
As you talk about this concept, which is pretty exciting, do you ever consider having a bike trail that could be utilized safely? So, I mean, this circle scares me to death. I never tried.
Absolutely. When I kind of skipped over the connectivity. I talked about
I know you talked
connectivity.
about the guy
So-
by there.
It's at the blue line.
There was a previous plan looked at. This was actually just kind of widening Hullover Creek. What we're now thinking about is a separate pedestrian bike bridge or boardwalk over Hullover Creek. And then, right now on the one side, there's already the sidewalk on the other side of, that needs to be improved. But, at least this would tie into that. So all the people that are coming down from Johns Island on that side could have safe access. Always the complications and issues are going to be getting across, or not having to deal with the circle itself. So that when I've talked to engineers, it's been probably you cross maybe around where the entrance to Seafields is going to be, then connect up here. But you also want connectivity on this side, so there's going to have to be a solution to crossing Betsy Carson Park.
Thank you.
And the initial thought, are you guys familiar with what we're planning on doing on Maybank around the Muni? So that you have the activated lights, that you have the ability to activate lights to control traffic, but other than that, traffic continues as normal. But that's a detail that's going to have to be worked out, but thank you for the question.
Can a restricted grant to the Conservancy be of use for the accommodation? Because for construction and maintenance of this, like the park where Rosebanks is going to be.
So,
Brad, could you repeat the question? We couldn't hear it.
Paul. She was asking whether, in fact, ATAX funds could be used for the Conservancy's benefit for restricted grants. The problem is you go back to this, as much as I would like to be, we're thinking kind of creatively about ways to take advantage of ATAX. There's nothing that neatly fits within the ATAX funds. We've grown our general funds as well, which are unrestricted. So we do have general fund cash capability. Can't remember what the number is. It's a few $1 million. That could be used directly to support conservation programs. You can back up. I don't. Yes, we have $22 million in our general fund. That's completely unrestricted. We have another $8.4 million that's completely unrestricted. We have $30 million that doesn't rely on those restrictions with ATAX funds. But the nice things about the ATAX funds is they have to be spent, and they can be spent only in certain ways. So if we can take advantage of that, let's try to take advantage of that. Yes, ladies.
Okay, so going back to this ATAX funds, you put up the rules of the state, okay? But what are the rules of the town? What is your strategy? So when I researched it, I went to Charleston and I went to Hilton Head. Not only do they have the state rules, they also made rules themselves about what they want to spend the funds on.
Well, right now, we don't have, it's just simply what council decides right now. what I suggested, what I talked about, is potentially of taking some of that $8.4 million to $22 million, putting it into our own, essentially, conservation fund. We would then establish rules and guidelines to receive applications for those funds.
We give money for marketing and promotion to Andelin. I think it's 300,000, 450,000 to the resort. But Hilton Head and Charleston do not give any money to marketing. They only give it to specific items, like having an event. So Night in Heron Park would be one, but they don't give it to any general. So just was wondering why we do that, but Hilton Head doesn't and Charleston doesn't.
Well, Kelly, you can certainly raise those issues in the ATAX committee.
My problem is the Andel Inn and Acre, so they put in their bid for the money.
So all I can say is Councilmember Farrell's not here, chairs the ATAX committees. We ultimately, the ATAX committee is an advisory committee to the council. So the council ultimately makes the decision. Now, there's a careful balancing act here because these funds are designed for essentially tourism promotion. The revenues are generated from touristic activity. The issue for us, somewhat uniquely, is we have constrained infrastructure and amenities. We don't have unlimited capacity to simply grow tourists because we don't have the infrastructure and amenities to support it. What we should think about is ways of spending dollars that are tourism related. They don't have to be spent on tourism promotion because it's specifically defined that this is tourist related, that will enhance the experience for visitors as well as the quality of life for residents. Maybe the focus should be on increasing the ADR, the average daily rate, or the amount of monies that tourists spend while they're here, rather than just growing the number of tourists that are coming on. And you should separate out, because a lot of the resorts' ATAX-related monies are focused on specific events, just like Andel just like Freshfields is on the Garden and Gun.
Which is a great event.
Yeah. So those kinds of things, that makes sense. But we struggle to spend all of the current monies because there haven't been applicants.
But you should be spending exactly what you're saying.
That's why I'm talking about this.
So, could leisure trails be considered a tourism event? And also, can I also tie that to something you said at the beginning about safety? The intersection, I know this is one small intersection, but Surf Song and Governors is a horrible intersection. There have been accidents there. One I know of specifically, the details of. It just needs to be more traffic calming on the.
So you've touched upon.
I'm trying to get you from both sides.
No, you've touched upon a different set of issues, which is the use of ATAX monies in ways that aren't for clear public purposes, but that benefit primarily private parties. And the concern that KICA has, now you need to talk to your KICA board about this, and supposedly they have an opinion of counsel from somewhere and exactly what it says. Who's ever going to know? But that says that if monies are, for example, we suggested apply for tax funds for boardwalk improvements because visitors use boardwalks. But the concern that the KICA board and the KICA as an entity has had is that the concern that would somehow threaten the viability of the front gate. That is, no longer could you restrict access only to property owners and their guests. I am spending a lot of time looking at those issues. I respectfully don't necessarily agree with that concern because we already spend a lot of public monies behind the gate. the town is responsible for health, safety, and welfare. We do zoning code enforcement, building code enforcement, regular code enforcement behind the gate. We provide trash services behind the gate. So I don't know quite whether, the issue is always, the concern has been if it's been spent on structures, land or something, that somehow that's of a different character. And I think it's more of a practical issue than anything else. Well, services, if the concern is about service, we can simply stop the service. But if you've actually spent it on boardwalks, does it mean you have to tear up all the boardwalks, or does that mean you lose the front gate? I will observe this to my fellow council member, my KICA board members, and as a fellow member of the association, is the town of Seabrook Island owns the utility. It's behind the gate. Publicly owned facility is completely behind the gate over there. The development agreement with Kiawah Partners specifically contemplated that the town of Kiawah Island might exercise eminent domain to acquire the Kiawah Island utility, which would be behind the gate and only providing services to people in a gated community. So it can't be the case, in my view, that would necessarily imperil the sanctity of the front gate.
The largest segment of ATAX money goes to the marathon, which takes place behind the gate.
Yep.
And they let everybody in.
Whenever the ATAX money is used,
Well, that's the
everybody
issue.
on the planet is allowed on the island. They don't need the guest pass to get in. That's when you use the ATAX money.
But no, but that is a decision. It's still, the KICA has made the decision, because what the covenants say, as you know, is the only people that are allowed are property owners and their guests.
Well, we all know that the summer concerts at the resort are 80% seafood.
I'm just saying, it's.
But the opinion that we got and the board's position all along has been, if it's even close to being a problem, don't do it, because once you lose, you lose.
That was never really, I disagree. That was never.
It's a policy, it's a written policy. It's policy number 7, trust me,
Well, it may be a policy. The question is whether that's a well-founded as a legal matter.
I never saw the opinion.
But if you want to discuss
Now you never
legal
will.
advice, then it's way.
Anyway, please, I don't want to keep everybody. If there are more questions, please, I'm happy to stay as long as you would like. Yes, sir.
Can I leave you with one thought on the sewage septic back here? As soon as you put that plan up there, I'm thinking septic problems. I'm a mechanical engineer. So look at packaged sewage treatment plants.
No, we just want to be tied into
Well, but that's another alternative.
No, I understand, and that would be a less than optimal, but better than where we are currently.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
You definitely got to have something bigger.
Yep. Appreciate that.
I also wanted to say that I think I'm most enthusiastic about the connectivity aspect. When I talk to educators on Johns Island who also need community space, I think the idea that Kiawah Town is connecting beyond our boundaries, I think it's very important for the future of our relationship with Johns Island.
At the end of the day,
and especially with all the development that's going on Main and Bohicket.
I've been spending a lot of time going to Johns Island Council meetings, Johns Island Task Force meetings, meeting with council members in Charleston County and others to try to communicate that whether it was true in the past or not, whether it was a perception that was born, it had any bearing to reality, that there has been a perception that Kiawah doesn't care about anybody else. And I've said, that not only is that not true, but we have a lot of shared interest. And we're going to have some interest where we diverge, and that's fine, but let's be able to have a constructive dialogue about all of that. When I've talked about the idea of the town being more proactive, like we have been in Island Park Place development, or to support conservation easements, to support what I didn't talk about is the urban growth boundary, and enter into an intergovernmental agreement to protect the urban growth boundary and not allow any encroachment. They really that's what they want to hear. And I think we can have a strong partnership on a lot of these issues. And part of that is, right now, we're going to have a conversation about, I'm kind of meeting with a county official on Friday afternoon about county funds to potentially help support a pedestrian bridge and bikeways and walkways here. We're going to sit down with SDOT. I'm going to convene a group that includes the resort, the conservancy, county officials, and others to deal with a host of issues regarding Betsy Carson Parkway. Yes, sir.
You know, over 60% of the employees at the private club live on Johns Island or Watermall. I believe an equivalent number is probably existing with the resort. We are all connected in ways that everyone would benefit by this mindset that you're sharing, the way of thinking about shared problem solving. The trail connection might be modest, but it's big for certain people. You know, I think that the stage is already set for us to be thought of as part of the greater community, as opposed to, like you were saying, arguably the sign out there that says Kiawah is not or Johns Island's not a driveway to Kiawah, right?
Kiawah's driveway.
Except it is.
All of the dynamic that you're sharing is already existing. We just need to express it and share it and connect with it.
Well, I had conversations even about that sign, and I think I know who that person is. I know where their relationships exist. But I actually challenged at one of the Johns Island Council meetings, and nobody really wanted to take me up on it. I said, you know, the idea that somehow is all we do is simply drive off Kiawah Island into West Ashley, onto 526 and up 26 or to the airport is ridiculous. I said, I bet, nobody took me up on it, that Laura and I have been to more Johns Island restaurants than any Johns Island resident has been. We'll patronize. We were at Royal Turn last night. We're going to check out Heyday, which is just open. By the way, come in, Heyday to your attention. It's a restaurant from the Island Provisions folks, right next to Psalms and High Steaks. There's a great butcher there. There's a lot. You know, we're consumers of Johns Island services and facilities, restaurants, just like Johns Island residents, some of whom do come down and patronize Freshfields Village. So that kind of attitude, you know, I'll be happy to take on. I know it exists out there, I've just got to continue to work to address it.
So, really quick, just this thing that people on Kiawah are entitled, and you know, that's been going on since I got here in 2012. In fact, when we were in the other building, the haters would just come out. In fact, I took a picture of two of those people that we are speaking of in these terms, holding the finger up right beside the door that said Town of Kiawah Island. Well, at one point in time, this person started spouting on Facebook, and I was going like, okay, how many times have you been in a Johns Island school as a mentor for any of these kids on this island? How many Kiawah residents are mentors in any of these schools, and do it on a yearly basis and take supplies to the kids? And we got backpack buddies, they make sure they get fed. How many, and after that conversation, that's the only time I have ever responded on Facebook, and this was, like I said, many years ago. He could not come back to that. And he has come back to some mighty angry things. But he could not come back to that, because what have you done for Johns Island lately? That was the end of my conversation. Here's what Kiawah residents do on a daily basis. What have you done for Johns Island Lake?
Thank you, Petra. I think there's increasing recognition through our charitable grant program, through our support, Kiawah Care support, a number of programs, our continued interaction and involvement. I've been invited to visit the new Habitat for Humanity development off Main Road. That's going to be, I think, 50 affordable housing units. That's desperately needed on Johns Island. I don't know whether the town can play any direct role in that, but I'm certainly happy to be supportive of and do anything I can. Just like we invited Barrier Island Free Medical Clinic here. We'll introduce them to the community. You know, again, as you noted, we have our staff works on, many of them live on Johns Island or Guatemala Island. A lot of our workforce on the club, the resort at Freshfields Village live on Johns Island. And so we really are all in this together. I really don't want to take any more time.
And
You've
there's
all
no
been
way to get here but your own private vehicle. There are no buses that run out here.
You've all been extraordinarily generous with your time. Thank you very much.